This took place at least maybe 10 years ago, and it happened to be one of my classmates that once went through this when he was about 15 years old. His name was Devin, and this happened in the summer. Now, Devin was a pretty interesting guy. Of course, he was one of those boys at school that would always do things at the last minute, but he was still a sweet guy and managed to keep up top of his work. I don't even know how he manages to get everything done at the last minute, but that's besides the point. In the summertime, they had a really bad thunderstorm where Devin was. Of course, his parents were out at a party with a few of their friends at a town about an hour or so away. Devin was used to being home alone, so it wasn't really a big problem, as his parents left him some money to buy pizza or something. And he did know how to cook some stuff, but he was learning. His older sister was out of college and had moved out to go live with her friends, so Devin was mostly home alone. One night during the thunderstorm, unfortunately the power went out and Devin was in the dark room. He was basically playing video games, but that was besides the point. He was so frustrated that he couldn't play his Xbox or anything, so he turned on his flashlight to make sure he wasn't alone or in the dark. He decided to wait for the storm to pass and then go out. Since he didn't really see anything going on in the house and the power was out during the outage, he waited inside for a while, and hopefully the power company would come back out and the power would be restored. However, though, after waiting for a while, he decided to go to bed as he didn't have anything to do, and of course it was near his bedtime anyway. He was getting ready to go to bed, and while having phone on, he was doing what he can and to get ready. However, as he was in the bathroom, he heard what seemed to be someone or something opening the back room and closing it. He honestly couldn't tell who it was and thought maybe it might have been his parents arriving home. There was a window from his parents' bedroom that looks out to the backyard, so he went out there. However, due to the rain being heavy and the power was still out, he couldn't see who it was outside. He thought that it might have been maybe someone or something out there and thought that maybe it could have been a neighbor. When a flashing of lightning struck, he looked to see that there was a hooded figure near the back fence of the backyard. Honestly, Devin had no idea who he was or why he was here. He didn't seem to notice him, so Devin picked up the phone, which appeared to be a cell, and called his dad and told him that someone was there. He told him to call the police, and that's exactly what Devin did, was locked himself in his parents' bedroom and stayed hidden. He occasionally looked out the window to see if the hooded figure was still there, but he couldn't really tell due to the rain being too hard, and whenever the lightning flashed, he looked. The hooded figure seemed to be getting closer to the back door. Now at this point, he was starting to get really more freaked out, especially when the police were on the phone. He waited in the house for at least a little while the police were trying to get. Suddenly, he heard what seems to be windows breaking coming from downstairs. He honestly knew whoever it was broke the back door or at least a window just to get in. He thought that he was done for when suddenly the sirens were heard in the distance. However, that was when the power came back on and Devin got up and ran downstairs. But when he got to the back door, whoever it was gone, and he pointed his flashlight and checked the backyard, but there was no one there. The police eventually knocked on the door and Devin answered, and the police did a thorough investigate. The window was unfortunately broken, so apparently Devin's parents had to get their their window replaced, which was one of the back windows that led to the backyard. They couldn't find any intruders, but they patrolled the area for the rest of the night. Still to this day, Devin was not sure what this hooded figure was doing or why he was in the house or tried to get in. But this was something that he had no idea what this figure was even capable of. He still gets really shivers to this day, even when he thinks about this story. However, nothing like this has happened since, and his parents had moved at least a few months later, as they were getting paranoid of being watched. About maybe 5 or 6 years ago, one of my friends who used to be living in the area, her name was Sandra, and she was a pretty amazing woman. Sandra at the time was about the same age as me, so she lived on the other side of the city I was living at. When she used to do night shifts at McDonald's, especially during school hours, or not school hours, but school day nights, which of course was tiring for her, but she learned to live with it and do what she had to. One of these nights she was at work at McDonald's when unfortunately they had suffered a power outage. Since then Sandra had to return home early since nothing was working at the time. She got ready and then walked back home, which she only lived at least a couple blocks. However, though, she was still home alone as both her parents were both at work, working the late hours at the hospital. However, when Sandra walks in the house, it was incredibly dark due to the power being out of the house. Fortunately, when she walked in, she called out if anyone was home, but there was no one there, so she assumed the parents were still in the hospital. The hospital must have had a working generator, so it would make sense why the parents didn't get out of work early, like Sandra did. However, Sandra didn't see anybody, so she ended up walking back in just to get unchanged and then put on her pajamas. As she was in her pajamas and she was about to go to bed, she all of a sudden looked to see that there was a man, or what appears to be one, sitting on the couch. He didn't seem to notice her, but she wondered how he got in. She checked the front door and it was locked when she got in, but when she looked at the other side, she somehow found out that one of the windows were open. Her parents might have either forgot to close the window, or maybe Sandra did on her way out. This man was not even moving. He was just sitting there. He didn't even acknowledge that she was there. That's when Sandra went to the next door neighbor's yard and ended up asking the neighbors to let her in, to which they did. She called the cops from their cell phone as Sandra's was dead. So they let her call the police, and when the police arrived, they arrested the man that was in the house. She apparently was told that this man was known for doing some really messed up stuff, such as sexual assault and etc. Apparently, he had somehow got into the window when it was open in the backyard and somehow managed to climb through. They took the man away, and Sandra's never seen him again. She had no idea if she stood any longer and that the man would still be there, or if something would have happened. That still scares Sandra to this day of what would have happened to her if the man had noticed her. About 20 years ago, from what I have been told, one of the teachers who I used to go to elementary school with said that she had a story of one of the friends or neighbors she had used to work the night shifts as a doctor. His name was Kenneth, and he was a doctor at the time of the story, and he was in his early 30s. When Kenneth worked as a doctor in the hospital, he normally looked after random patients, from pregnant women to people with serious injuries and illnesses. He was pretty good. As Kenneth was doing his best to help his patients, he unfortunately had to work the night shift. The power was out pretty much everywhere at the time as they had a bad storm, but however, for in the hospital, they had a generator that worked for the machines and stuff. Kenneth was doing his best with one patient who happened to have cancer when he was told by one of his nurses to go and get a stretcher from the basement as they had to go to an emergency and they needed some. The EMTs were hoping he can get it, so Kenneth went down the basement to get it. However, since the power to the basement was out, the only generators that were working are for the floors with patients that were hooked on the machines and etc. However, Kenneth looked and he saw that there was the basement, so he got his flashlight out and went down there. As he was finding his way through the stuff, he found the extra stretcher he was looking for and brought it upstairs. Just as he was getting to the stairs door, he heard what seemed to be a loud cackle or some sort. He honestly hurried back upstairs and closed the basement door. When he told everyone what was down there, they all looked, but they couldn't see anyone. Kenneth does not know still to this day if whatever he saw was completely paranormal, or was there someone really in the basement. The cops eventually looked and security looked through, but they couldn't find anyone. Not even the camera footage could tell if someone had been in the basement, it was pretty much useless due to the power being out in the basement, so they couldn't really see if anyone was down there or anyone entering the basement as the footage was very grainy. Kenneth never did night shifts after that, and he is now still a doctor, but at a different hospital. He has never had an experience like this again, but he still wondered if it was really a person, what did this person wanted with Kenneth, or what would they have done if Kenneth stayed any longer?